Hi, welcome to Pennsylvania Newsmakers, and as always, thanks for watching. Well, the man who's responsible for ferreting out waste and inefficiency in state government here, and then coal as part of America's energy portfolio, all of that follows these words.
This is Pennsylvania Newsmakers, a fast-paced, unrehearsed weekly discussion with and about the leaders who shape your world. And now, here's your host, Terry Madonna.
Hi, welcome back. Well, Eugene DePasquale is here. He's the Pennsylvania Auditor General. Did I get that right,
You
General?
got it 100%
Waste
right.
inefficiency.
That's right.
I almost added corruption because you uncover some of that, don't you?
Sometimes, well, in one intermediate unit in the Northeast, we found some corruption. We forwarded that on to the Federal Justice Department, and now there's a person sitting in jail because of that.
Yeah, we have you on periodically, and by the way, thanks for coming on. I appreciate it because
pleasure.
you play a very important role in making sure that the tax dollars the legislature appropriates, the governor and others, spend, agencies and departments, you're responsible for making sure that they're spent wisely. So you've been in the office now more than a year. Give me two or three of sort of the big things that you've uncovered or concerns that you would have. Good time to review that, I think.
For starters, you look at the school district level. A lot of times there's a big debate about the big ticket dollar items, and we get that, and that's going to be a big part of the gubernatorial campaign. But if you look inside of our audit, sometimes it's not the most dramatic ratings driver in the world, but how superintendent contracts are structured and how the retirement packages are paid out. That certainly is an impact. We have to look at, when it comes to charter schools and whether you're pro or anti-charter school, we've got to address this lease issue that's happening where money that's going to basically the charter operators, in some instances we think is inappropriate. So I
want to get to that in greater detail in another segment. Go ahead.
But that's something, again, on the nuance side of it. How the state, and this is an issue that gets very little attention, and this is both Democratic and Republican administration, what we've seen, is how the state does contracting. The state always says we want to partner with our vendors. In the private sector, the people they contract out with, they view them as employees. They hold them accountable. In the public sector, sometimes if somebody screws up the contract, we don't go after the vendor to try to get the money back.
I think overall, throughout the course of the sort of the modern history of the Auditor General, I think we've been pretty fortunate and have pretty good ones, regardless of the party. They just did the audits and produced the reports, and I mean you can't get into that as you have not. And I think overall I think we've been pretty lucky about that. I want to ask you one of the things. I want to talk about charter schools because there's a lot of complexity to it, a lot of debate, and there's proposals in the legislature. But before I go there, what's going on with higher education? We have state-related schools, state-owned schools, community colleges. They get state dollars. We don't talk much about that, but it's a lot of money. What is it, more than $1 billion a year?
I start off with, just as a parent of two young kids, one that's going to be entering high school next year, one that's going to be entering sixth grade. Any middle-class parent has got to be scared to death of how they're going to be able to afford higher education for their kids. Any middle-class parent, and that, obviously low-income, it would be even scarier. We're going to take a hard look at what is driving the cost of higher education in Pennsylvania. That's going to be our big ticket items moving forward. Certainly looking at the state system of higher education, but we want to address it in a comprehensive way because some of the things that we're seeing on the continual increase in tuition, it simply is untenable moving forward. Well,
I think part of the problem also is, to be factual about it, is there was a pretty big cut 3 years ago, 19% to the state-related, 18% state-related, Pitt, Penn State, Temple, and Lincoln. I have to mention Pitt. He's a big Pittsburgh fan, but we won't go in there. We'll have that discussion for another. Follow him on Twitter. You get all kinds of stuff about the Steelers and the Pirates and your teams out there. Good going. But the point here is that they did suffer some pretty big cuts, and it's not 4 or 5%. It was large cuts to these systems.
I think you have the cuts to the systems. That's part of it. I think, and again, this is something we're going to really get in the weeds on moving forward, and we'll be back on to talk about it. But there is a concern of a keeping up with the Joneses, so to speak, on dorm construction, building construction. And look, I'm not trying to be when I was a kid type of thing, but when we were in college, the idea of a dorm room was a place where you went to sleep. And now there seems to be a very competitive atmosphere, and there's a cost to that too.
Yeah, you're right. But I spent my life on a college campus, and when you and I went to college, it was a very different environment. students are a little less reluctant to move into 4 cinder block rooms, and they're trying to attract students, quality students. Right. And in order to do that, you have to, upgrade the facilities.
But there is a cost to that, and we have to we have to get it how to handle that.
Look, I'm not at all criticizing. I'm merely explaining. I think what the pressure is. Was there any before we run to break? And I want to come back to this charter school thing, which is complicated and involves a lot of moving parts. Was there anything you found out this year that strikes you in the year that you did as, wow, I didn't realize this? I mean, is there any audit that you did that you can think of?
The audit we did at the Department of Public Welfare, where this company out of Boston received a contract for home care for the disabled people and people with mental disabilities, and the complete utter lack of regard for what was happening to individuals across our state and the workers that weren't getting paid by this Boston company.
Wow.
And the lack of the Department of Public Welfare.
I remember reading that,
and the lack of, it was Public Partnerships was the name of the company out of Boston. And I want to commend current Secretary Bev McGrath for doing a great job of cleaning up the mess.
Okay.
But the previous secretary has utter disregard for what was happening on the ground.
All right, we're talking with the Auditor General of the state of Pennsylvania, and there's a lot of controversy and legislative action and trying to get a handle on charter schools. We'll talk with the Auditor General about that in a moment.
This broadcast of Pennsylvania Newsmakers is presented by the Pennsylvania Chamber of Business and Industry, the statewide voice of business. This broadcast of Pennsylvania Newsmakers is brought to you by the Pennsylvania Highway Information Association, the go-to source to learn about transportation projects and issues. Please visit pahighwayinfo.org. And by the Pennsylvania Manufacturers Association. Business in Pennsylvania is our business.
Hi, well, I'm back with the Auditor General Eugene DePasquale. We're going to talk about charter schools. And before I introduce this, here's what I want to say. There are 174 taxpayer-funded charters that enroll 120,000 students. So, General, we're not talking about a little.
No.
Go ahead. So tell me give us the general overview of where the charter school situation stands.
First of all,
what you're concerned about.
We audit all of our public schools in Pennsylvania and all of our charter schools. And charters, by the way, it's important to know, it's not, when people think charters, I think a lot of times they think brick and mortar. But the cyber charters is almost a completely different entity than your brick and mortar charter. And we were doing audits and seeing consistent patterns of, on lease issues and some other concerns we were seeing across the state. And we're hoping that the Pennsylvania Department of Education would weigh in and try to be helpful in some of these. And for a whole host of reasons, they weren't. We conducted hearings all over the state. We had a diverse group of people that were pro and anti-charter, everywhere in between. And we are now in the midst of putting together a report to try to improve the situation in Pennsylvania. Number one, the whole goal of charter schools in the beginning was to try different ideas to find out what worked and what different, and then pass those reforms on so all public school students
to duplicate the curriculum in the regular schools. Is that correct?
That's correct. Yeah. So, but that's not happening, and it's not necessarily the fault of the charter or even the traditional public. It's just our system. So we have to figure out a way to create a better environment for that collaboration to work. That's number one.
Right.
Number two, certainly we've seen it, I will tell you, on the cost of buildings and this lease issue. We're going to have to completely get a grip on what the cost of the buildings of a lot of the charter schools. Again, they've expanded well beyond what people thought was going to happen. So that's a critical issue as well. But we also have to get at another core issue. And that is a lot of your brick and mortar charter schools, and this is just to call it as blunt as I can be, are in low income areas. And the number one reason why parents take their kids out of your traditional public school and into the charter school is school safety.
I was going to say violence in the school, drugs.
So whether it's real or perceived or anywhere in between.
Bullying, I hear bullying is an issue.
We had parents who were almost at tears in some of our hearings saying they didn't want to take their kid out of the public school, but they believed the charter was safer. That's something that we all have to take very seriously.
Yeah, 67,000 students, according to one report, in Philadelphia alone, in what, 60-some, 80, actually 86 here in my notes, 86 charter schools. So 86 of the 174, right, in Philadelphia.
Yeah, Philadelphia has basically, of the brick and mortar charters, Philadelphia has about half.
About half of them. And it's drugs, violence. What do you think? I mean, I know this is a little, you were a former lawmaker, it's a little bit out of your purview, but there's this business of funding where school districts are concerned that if you go to a charter school, you take 80% of the funding with you, and they lose the funds. Have you gotten into that, or is that just not?
We've heard from it, and it's clearly a problem. But I think that it is a bigger problem. That's looking at the micro side of it. The bigger problem is the way we fund public schools in Pennsylvania in general. We don't really have a funding formula. Right. It's never been based on the kid or even the number of kids. It's based on sort of an old formula from the early 90s that we just keep putting duct tape on year after year after year. And there's nothing based on the kid, number of kids, and what are sort of the actual costs today versus what it was in the early 90s. Yeah. So that to me drives the problem more so than some of the micro issues about the charter issue.
And then there's this issue about whether higher education institutions ought to have their own charter schools. Right. Some that have great schools of education can probably do that. Others that don't have, be. So where do you, go ahead.
Yeah, I was going to say, there's a whole, and there is a very big difference between being a great geology professor in college, running a great institution of higher education, and figuring out how to teach a third grader. It's two different, and believe me, there's teachers that are brilliant in the third grade class that couldn't teach a high school senior and vice versa.
And some of the public universities, having spent most of their life, at one Millersville, for example, they were big with teacher education. We had learning centers. So it may be more appropriate for some.
That's correct.
But not for others. All right, we got about a minute left. So, charter schools, is that your focus moving forward?
Public education across the board, charter and brick and mortar charter, cyber, and public education. That is really the lion's work of what we do in the Auditor General. We have some other big ticket audits that are out there on some of the state agencies. Certainly, you're going to be hearing from us on that. But the most important thing we can do is improve education in Pennsylvania.
I'm going to really put you on the spot here. You don't mind this. You don't get to audit the books of the state legislature, right?
Correct.
Is there any sense that that's likely to change soon, given now we've had more talk about ethics reform and whether or not there should be a gift ban and blah blah blah?
And I would say when I was in the legislature, one of my bills was a gift ban. I think it's crazy that we don't have a comprehensive gift ban. My statement on that is very clear. If the legislature gives me the power to audit them, I will gladly do it.
I get it. Just what you said. Look, you're always welcome. When you get done with this, you come on the program and we'll talk about it. All right, coal is part of America's energy portfolio. We're going to talk with former Senator John Pippy about that, and we'll be back after these words.
This broadcast of Pennsylvania Newsmakers is brought to you by Pennsylvania Credit Union Association. Pennsylvania Credit Unions, where people are worth more than money. To find a credit union that is right for you, check out ibelong.org. And by the Energy Association of Pennsylvania, Pennsylvania's energy information source. This broadcast of Pennsylvania Newsmakers is presented by the Hospital and Health System Association of Pennsylvania, working towards a healthy Pennsylvania, and by the Pennsylvania Coal Alliance, representing companies involved in America's most affordable, reliable energy source. To learn more, visit pacoalalliance.com.
Hey, welcome back to the program. We're going to switch gears a little bit and talk about coal. Pennsylvania, anthracite coal, bituminous coal, historically was a big producer of coal. Obviously, a lot of debate about coal as an energy source, as part of the energy portfolio. We're going to hear from John Pippy, a former state senator, by the way, who's CEO of the Pennsylvania Coal Alliance. We're going to go through some of the aspects and let Senator Pippy get his points out here, which we want to hear. So let's talk about the overview. Where do you see where coal fits in the energy portfolio. Let's start that way, and then we'll look at the pros and the cons and some of the issues. Where does coal now fit in the big picture?
Well, Terry, first, thanks for having me. I always appreciate
My
the
pleasure.
opportunity to talk with you. Right now, coal provides about 40% of the electricity here in the Commonwealth of Pennsylvania. I call it the big three. Coal, natural gas, and nuclear make up over 90% of the electricity in Pennsylvania right now.
So that coal generates the electricity.
Right now,
got it.
80% of our bituminous coal goes to electricity generation, which is powering 40%. So if you have 10 light bulbs, 4 of them are being powered by coal right now. Around the world, by 2017, coal will be the #1 source of energy because it's reliable, it's available, and it's low cost. So globally, coal will be the key player, larger than oil, larger than natural gas. Just in the U.S. alone, we have over 250 years of easily recoverable coal. So
and bituminous is produced in the southwestern part of Pennsylvania. That's the heart of it. Is that correct?
Very much so. It's almost like the Marcellus shale play. We go all the way up to Clearfield County, really, and then if you go, it's pretty much from there west and southwest, where the majority, though, of the Pennsylvania coal comes out of the Greene, Indiana County areas.
Okay. Now, all right. Well, so we got that element out. So let's talk about the debate over coal as an energy source, clean coal versus natural gas and the other renewable energy sources, to get your perspective on that.
Sure. I'm an environmental engineer. That was my degree when I came out of West Point. So I studied it, and I believe engineering is one of the ways that we can help make our world a better place. So when I talk about this, I talk about coal as being part of a very diverse portfolio, of which Pennsylvania is very fortunate because we have such a reserve of not only coal, but natural gas. That's becoming a big player, over a 700% increase in the last couple of years of natural gas coming out. Nuclear is a huge player in Pennsylvania. And then we have a growing and burgeoning renewable sector. Each of them can provide positives, and each of them has their own challenges and risks. The issue with coal is that we are best when we are the base load, when we're the ones that are generating 24 hours a day. Just like your car on the highway gets better gas mileage, a coal-fired power plant that is providing continuous base load energy is more efficient, has fewer emissions, and really provides low-cost energy. The debate now has been coal, because it's a fossil fuel, is one of the higher CO2 levels, or has one of the higher CO2 numbers when it relates to how much coal is burned.
So pursuing that angle a bit, when the federal government talks about emission standards, if I got this correct, for reducing CO2, how does that fit into what you do, and how does that relate to what your industry faces as a challenge?
Well, our big fight right now with the federal government is that they want us to meet a new emission standard for CO2 that is unreachable with current technology, and at the earliest is at least a generation, maybe 15, but at least more than 10 and less than 20 years away. Coal has about twice as much CO2 as natural gas per the same amount of energy burned. If they allow us to put in a new coal power plant today, it would be 90% cleaner, but it would also have about a 20 to 30% reduction in CO2. They want us to go from 0 to 60. We can go from 0 to 30.
0 to 30,
and that's the fight it's very similar to some of the other issues at the federal level, where they're putting a standard in place that's not achievable. The solution would be what they did with the automobile industry. Don't ask my car to be able to go 50 miles per gallon now, but continually ratchet up the standard. That's all we're asking, which is different from the old debates.
All right, we're talking with John Pippy from the Pennsylvania Coal Alliance. We're going to continue this discussion, find out where coal fits in our nation's energy portfolio. We'll do that after these words from, we're going to pay some bills from our commercial sponsors.
This broadcast of Pennsylvania Newsmakers is presented by Highmark Blue Shield, changing the way health plans work for business with a variety of plan options for employers and more choices for employees. Information is available at highmark.com. Have a greater hand in your company's health. And by the Pennsylvania Healthcare Association, the future of long-term care. This broadcast of Pennsylvania Newsmakers is brought to you by the Pennsylvania Business Council and by the Pennsylvania Business Council Education Foundation.
Welcome back. We're talking about coal as part of the nation's energy portfolio with former State Senator John Pippy. Senator, let's talk a little bit about this whole business of moving forward with these standards and its effect on the economy.
Well, I mean, Terry, the numbers are very clear, independent. These are federal numbers as well as professionals are saying that if you prematurely remove coal, meaning if you take coal off the mix and you don't replace it with something, even if you were to replace it with natural gas, you're going to see a significant increase in pricing. And part of that is because coal is such a low-cost source of energy, you can keep not only the price down for the consumer, which is important, but the jobs in manufacturing, I mean, everything critical. Millions of jobs would be lost at the national level.
Before I let you go, we just read this week where Ukraine is going to get this huge multi-billion-dollar loan, which they have to pay back, so they're raising the price. It looked like 50%.
Right.
50% increase in the cost of natural gas. I don't know what that means America now, it looks like we're going to move towards exporting natural gas, which I take it there's some limit on now, if I understand that correctly. What's that mean to coal?
Well, I think two things. First, we are very fortunate to have Marcellus in the natural gas play. And because of that, we have so many options with domestic energy independence. What natural gas can do is if they can export it, it gives us a geopolitical tool so that Ukraine can use U.S. natural gas as opposed to the Russian pipelines. Yeah. And Russia has been having a stranglehold on Europe with natural gas. The challenge is, though, economics will tell you, if you start using it more, the price will go up. It won't be as high as it was maybe in the past, but much higher than it would be now.
Well, if you raise the demand, then obviously that's going to, if the demand goes up, it's going to raise the price.
It's going to raise the price.
And so will that have an effect on the price of coal?
Yes, it would have an impact on the price of coal, but more importantly, it will have a huge impact on the overall price of electricity.
Yeah.
And so there should be a balance.
I get the relationship.
Because we should have coal providing more of the base load, natural gas some base load, but also what we call the peak demand type, and that would be a win-win for everyone. The world's going to need 50% more energy in the next generation.
One of the things I'd like you to come back and talk about at some subsequent time is clean coal. I hear this all the time. I'm not sure what it means. I've read stuff about it, but at any rate, thanks for coming on the program. We'll see you next week for another edition of Pennsylvania Newsmakers, and as always, stay well.